yeah, I was actually wanted to monitor it, but I realized I don't have the Restream account
Oh,
login info.
Josh can help you
See
with that.
here?
What did I say? And the other thing too is, are you able to record in camera at the same time as you're feeding the
Yes.
stream?
Yeah.
Excellent. So we got tape on there
Yep.
or whatever you got to be
Yeah.
using these days.
Yep. I got
Okay.
tape, digital tape now. It used
I
to
used to
be.
work with stuff. It was called film. It had holes in the side of it. You might have heard it.
I've heard its legend. No, I started on film.
I'll
Let's
find him if he's
yeah, see if
around.
he's around.
That's cool. That's good to know. And the
Yeah.
299 you heard about him?
Pardon?
The 299 something you guys always talk to him, Joe.
I don't know what that is.
Your frequency, your scale 299 P whatever.
Oh yeah, yes. Like
Okay.
it's like 29.7. Yeah.
So that's
You're able to push the stream out to the
Yeah.
server.
But I think like if I had your account, your Restream account, I could monitor it, but I don't.
Oh, I can log you into mine.
Yeah, you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, yours is 2997.
I had no idea you guys were using Restream.
Yeah, that's what they gave me.
It's great.
So all right, so you take over. You drive.
Okay, do you want me to log out of here?
Yeah, you can log me out.
Okay. Yep, they sure are.
Anything I can do to be useful?
No, you're all good, Carl. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So I could leave it up or just wait.
You can leave it up.
Okay.
No worries.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. I appreciate you guys.
Great. I did another speed test and it was like around like 2.5, 3.
Got better. No, it got better.
Got better. Yeah.
Dude, when we started
closing one. So now we're like
Are you
doing.
guys? So I was assuming they came with VSS coming down to you. Right?
Yes.
You guys
Yes.
are set up with their system.
Yep.
They're going to show you their page.
Yep. We've already got it.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yep. 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 So we've got it to their page. It's going, and we're just
Awesome.
we're ready.
Killed it.
Yeah, ready
And
for
then
that.
You're done, right? We did.
For the day, yes.
And
This is the last thing. Yep, it's the last thing. So
So we can go drink.
yeah, right. Exactly. I could use one. So the room will still be open though, because I think.
Oh yeah.
All
I'd
right.
be able to open up there until probably just 6:30,
Yeah.
7 o'clock time.
All right. So I'm gonna drop some stuff off, so then I don't less for me to bring in on Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah. Yay. Oh.
Yeah, 'cause you're not back
We were
tomorrow,
not on the list for parking, but that is very typical. Don't get mad because that's every year.
But like,
It's like
why
that.
is it every year?
I don't know.
Like that's
I'm
the
like,
thing. Like, why is it every year?
He
Because
let
your
us
names
in.
are on like.
I don't understand. Whatever list gets, they let us in. Yes, but whatever probably happens from when they print that piece of paper that they give to the person, there's probably things that happen after that where the new piece of paper like doesn't get printed or whatever.
Well, I'm sorry.
That's okay. If are they doing? Hey, Jim. This is Jack. Jack.
Hey,
This
Jim.
is Jim.
Jim, nice to meet
So
you.
looked at the Facebook and it was okay.
It was.
Okay. They said the internet in here. So
The
they
internet's
went-
been terrible
Well, also
all over
the Wi-Fi
the corporate place, like in our office.
We got like a 0.1.
I mean, I pulled it up on my phone from over there, and
But it
it's
was
still
okay.
bad.
Okay. I mean,
For those
there were only 9 people watching, but those 9.
For those
You want to
9
deliver for them. So
So, do you have a recording of it?
yes.
Part of that?
Yep.
So,
Recorded it all. Yeah. So you guys can always do something else.
you can always
with it down-
repost it.
Yeah. I was just thinking down the road.
How are you?
Better now.
Yeah, this is a big hurdle.
Huge river.
But I was gonna ask. Sometimes they have the parking placards. They're not doing it. They're not doing it this year.
We do have them.
So
If Mark put you on a list, we can.
because they didn't have our
Roxanne has
names
But
on
if you're on the list,
security.
you're-
They didn't have our names on the security list.
You did it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's fine.
Let me see if Roxanne still has placards.
I'm gonna go check in up here real quick.
Okay. Hey, Joe.
My understanding is that you're streaming, right? So
I'm streaming, but also recording.
okay. Now, what I was told is one of his big thoughts here is he wants to be able to edit this later.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, I don't want to be duplicating 90% of what you're doing. So either I got to kind of have a plan, or maybe I could put a monitor between us and I could see what you're. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I'm gonna be covering it like it's live. You know, so I'm gonna be going on the speaker, and then going too wide, and then the next person, and then live.
So you're just okay.
I have
you're,
to shoot it like it's live.
Okay,
So I
and
would
you-
say.
so he told you to zoom in on everybody who speaks and that stuff, and
I mean, that's you didn't say that, but that's just what I'm
no,
gonna
that's
assume to do.
fine. So what
So I
will,
would assume that my shot's gonna be pretty good, like almost always.
Yeah.
You know.
so I'll get when I know that you've got time to get to like if there's someone changing speakers or something like that. If I see that, maybe I'll try to get in a tight before till you get to it, and then I'll just get like 3 shots, 4 shots,
Yeah.
cut shots.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
anything
that's
that
perfect.
would. I mean,
And
if
without a
if
director,
you're
there's-
covering it,
yeah.
then I just want to make sure at the end it doesn't go. This is all the same.
Should be good. And you're shooting 30p.
Yeah.
Yes, we got that.
Yes, 3. So it's going to match
In
up
the
real good.
museum.
Yeah, I've actually got one, which I still use sometimes.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I,
for that.
I still have an AF100 I still use like
Yeah.
for an occasional cutaway.
I've got a
was kind of like everyone was like, yeah, and our board, like our CACA board, was like, that's the only complaint we got.
Recording for this one?
So concerned.
Yeah.
To your point, that's 100%. Everyone's on board.
I love that.
It's good to have that. This is like going in a big party. And I'll take that when you're done. After this, and we'll probably do a little later in the bar. They have one meeting.
Well, it's weird as hell, but
Two ladies.
it's people are curious.
Yeah, Bob and Lecter. And
Yeah.
no record.
Ladies and gentlemen, our presentation will begin in 3 minutes. Our presentation will begin in 3 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, from Emergency Safety Solutions Incorporated, Chief Safety Advocate, Andrew Gutze.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Gutze, Chief Safety Advocate for Emergency Safety Solutions. And I've spent over 3 decades in the automotive industry. The bulk of that at Toyota North America, where I was responsible for product planning and where I developed my passion for building safe vehicles that keep their occupants safe and secure. In 2019, I retired from Toyota with no plan to work again, but that safety passion did not subside. I was drawn to ESS because of their passion to address a huge hidden problem in motor vehicle safety. ESS began on a very personal note. Our co-founder, David Tucker, was almost killed on the side of the road in 2014. He'd done all of the right things. His hazard lights were on, he was pulled off on the shoulder, and fortunately, he jumped out of the way just before an 18-wheeler sheared off his rear view mirror. That got him, myself, and our team thinking about the severity of the problem. This evolved into a team of seasoned automotive pros from the OEM and supplier world, plus a few strategic advisors. We're very pleased that one of our first and most passionate supporters was former NHTSA administrator and emergency trauma surgeon, Dr. Ricardo Martinez. He couldn't be with us today, but you'll be hearing from him in a few minutes on this critical matter. We've also included just a handful of the many people we've interviewed whose lives have been upended by roadway collisions. Take a look.
I looked behind me and I had an 18-wheeler coming directly for me.
I finished putting the spare tire on. I hear my friend screaming my name, "Sean, move, move."
I was really scared because I feared that I was going to get hit on the side of this road when I'm trying to talk to the police.
And I dove out of the way and it took off the side view mirror of my vehicle. And I just couldn't believe it. I was just almost killed.
An appalling reality in plain sight. Over 19,000 people killed or injured annually. That's just in the US. Every 5 minutes, another disabled vehicle is struck by an oncoming motorist.
To me, it was shocking. As an industry, it was actually frankly embarrassing.
And those numbers continue to climb.
You know, what's really concerning about the deaths with disabled vehicles is that it doesn't fit into our traditional categories. And so oftentimes it's underreported or misreported. And so we have to look deeper. When we find it people associated with a disabled vehicle, either inside the vehicle as a sitting duck or outside where they get hit and killed as an unintentional pedestrian.
They leave these people waiting for up to an hour to 2 hours, waiting for help to arrive. And in that time, they are completely exposed to the risk and danger on a highway with vehicles flying by at 60 and 70 miles an hour.
I got hit in the car got pushed down Verrazano Bridge, I got knocked unconscious, so they had to call an ambulance and have me taken off the bridge.
We observed a wreck half a mile, quarter mile in front of us. So we pulled over, identified ourselves as police officers, turned the hazard lights on my truck and trailer. I turned around and looked at the roadway, and there's a 18-wheeler swerving. I turned, tried to run. He ran over me, ran over another vehicle on the side of the road. My buddy was thrown off the bridge and killed.
Well, we really have to remember these aren't just statistics. These are real human beings. These are fathers, mothers, your friends, neighbors, family members, community members. The most important thing we can do is to recognize that and prevent that from happening to anyone.
My husband was headed to a campsite and he got a flat tire. He didn't make it home that night. He was tragically struck on the side of a road by another driver.
We have all this technology. They put in rear view cameras, okay? We have CarPlay, we have hands-free so that you don't have to be distracted by answering the phone or a text. We have GPS.
The problem is abundantly clear.
This is preventable and predictable. We can't ignore this any longer.
Well, it's becoming clear to us that millions of people are going through this every day, stuck on the roadside, sometimes for hours, with nothing more than their hazard lights for protection. We thought, what could we do to improve the situation? We started looking for data to help us define the size and scope of this issue. NHTSA, IIHS, DOT, all sorts of tables on crashes, fatalities, and costs, but not a single reference to roadside collisions with disabled or stopped vehicles. As we dug further, we discovered this was a far greater problem than we had ever imagined. In the USA alone, up to 19,000 people are killed or injured in disabled crashes every year. That's a crash every 5 minutes taking place. By the time we're done here today, at least 4 more roadside collisions will have occurred. We can only hope that everyone survives. And here's the real chiller. Our research has shown that these numbers are compounding at roughly 8% per year. I also want you to know that as automotive professionals, we live and breathe numbers. And these data are conservative. It's an appalling reality, and it's hiding in plain sight. Now, we looked next at what had been done on the OEM side to address the issue. I mean, in terms of occupant protection and survivability, today's vehicles are light years ahead of the 1950s. Ironically, it was in 1951 that the four-way flashers were first invented, nearly 3/4 of a century ago. And they weren't mandated until 1966. And yet, despite huge advancements in almost every aspect of safety, when it comes to protecting occupants of stopped and vulnerable vehicles from oncoming motorists, that's where the progress has stopped. Now, please understand this is not a jab at the car companies. As I said, today's cars and trucks are exponentially safer and more connected than ever. It's not a slight on the drivers either. We believe almost all of them will slow down and pull over if we let them know that they need to. At ESS, that's where the light bulb literally went off. In the past few years, we've developed our solution aimed at automakers and commercial fleets. We're now in market on almost 2 million Tesla vehicles in the United States. We're already seeing real-world video emerge on social media of the technology in use on the road. It has also been publicly announced that Volkswagen and Stellantis are actively evaluating our system. But that's really not the point. We're not here to sell you on our system. We think it sells itself. We will be happy to demo it for you. Right next to the media center, we have a small little display. But we're really here to talk about the issue of roadway safety. What can we do to protect stranded motorists on our roadways? We've barely scratched the surface of this thoroughly preventable cause of injury, death, and property damage, one that I might add disproportionately affects the poor. So I would like us to begin a discussion on what we can do, suppliers, OEMs, legislators, and by all means, consumers, to give this issue the focus it deserves. This deadly problem has gone on long enough. It's time for us to take action, and on that note, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel. First is Scotty Reese. Scotty is an automotive journalist, a Forbes automotive writer, and the founder of A Girl's Guide to Cars. Please welcome her. Thank you. Next is Kirk Steudel, former director of the Michigan Department of Transportation. Kirk. And next is Wiley Deck. Wiley is a former deputy administrator for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and current vice president of government affairs and public policy at Plus. Thank you for joining us here today in Chicago. So I'll turn my first question to Scotty. I'd like to know, as a journalist and as a parent, how do you view the issue of roadside collisions and stranded motorists?
So thank you. I'm going to answer as a parent first, because only a couple of years ago I got the call that no parent wants. My 20-year-old daughter, I might cry talking about this, and luckily everything was okay, but it was just a horrible moment, a gut-wrenching moment. My 20-year-old daughter called me, "Mom, we've had a flat tire." She was driving her 17-year-old sister, so not one but two of my children in a car on the side of a very busy interstate highway with a flat tire. What do I do? Now, we've had this conversation before, but she was a little freaked out and wasn't thinking clearly, which people aren't when something's wrong with your car. And so but I didn't know to tell her to get out and get away from the car, which is what some experts say, to stay in the car, which can also be dangerous. After you hang up with me, call roadside assistance. The manufacturer has a plan, and she was covered. And luckily, someone was there in a couple of hours, and it was fine. But they did get out of the car and get away from it safely. But it was nerve-wracking until they were back on the road safely. You're on pins and needles. That's a horrible thing. As a woman, you also compound that problem with, I'm vulnerable, and there are predators who may stop and try to help you. And you're either standing out in a field or you're in a car, you're vulnerable either way, and who knows how long it's going to be before roadside assistance gets there. So, because no one knows except for the person you've called, and that's a real challenge. And then I'm going to add, as a journalist, our job as a journalist is to moderate conversation around important topics. And we're not moderating this conversation. It's something that we do need to talk more about.
Thank you. I'm curious, do you feel that your daughters had training on what to do in these events? Or
Well, they knew to call their
They
mom.
called their mother. That was clearly
That
key.
was great. They did recognize that it was a dangerous situation and they needed advice. They were 20 and 17.
Yeah.
They're pretty young. Now my daughter's now a little bit older and a little bit more experienced and knows and has a better idea of what to do. Things worked out very well, but you realize in that moment how bad things can go.
Yeah. Thank you. So next I'll maybe ask Kirk to make some comments here. So Kirk, as the former director for the Michigan Department of Transportation for over 10 years, how do you see crash avoidance as a present problem or a future solution? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I've been involved in the traffic safety area for 20 plus years. In fact, it was almost 20 years ago I was working with the United Nations on a decade of road safety. So this has been near and dear to the public agency side and from a state DOT perspective. And professionally, I'm a professional engineer. So look, I want to get people home at night, every night. But let me put it in larger context. And while Andrew was talking about roadside injuries and deaths, I want to talk about the total number of deaths. Almost 43,000 people didn't make it home last year. 43,000. That's 117 people per day that did not get to have dinner. Think about that. Now that number is up from 32,000 in 2010. That's an increase of 23% in those 11 years. Just think about that more broadly, right? That's 5 people in an hour on average. 5 people. So we have this catastrophe happening all over America's roads, and it takes all of us to really think about how do we drive that number down? How do we get awareness? Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. So if there's 43,000 people that are died in 2021, what's the right number? What should we be shooting for? Should we put it in half? Maybe 2/3? Now let me ask you this question. What's the number for your family? How many of your family members, except maybe the brother-in-law you don't like, how many of your family members would you say is acceptable to lose every year to a traffic accident? And the number is 0, right? So how are we going to get there? Well, it's really a safe systems approach. It's a system that involves the OEMs, the manufacturers, and Andrew, I'm glad that you pointed out earlier that said, look, this is not about OEMs not doing things right, public agencies not doing it right. No, look, we all have a stake in this. There's a shared responsibility of everybody. That means manufacturers, that means road agencies, that means law enforcement, that means emergency response, and the 5th one is the user. The user has to be responsible as well. And if we think about what happens inside the car, we think about what happens with your iPhone, the user has to be responsible. Now I want to leave with one quote that I got from the U.S. Department of Transportation just yesterday. And it was, their call to action, it was, we are calling on all of America, every level of government, every insurance company, every motor carrier, and every auto manufacturer to embrace and commit to specific actions to stop the 43,000 deaths that happen every year. So that's just in broader context of what's happening on the roadways.
Thank you. Quick little follow-up question. Here we are at the Chicago Auto Show. We have quite a number of journalists that have come here that are present and covering all sorts of automotive messages. Is there any particular request or message that you have for journalists here?
Yeah, I think the number one issue is we have to talk about this issue. For too long, we've said, you know what, it's 2 people over here, it's 1 person over there, it's maybe 3 people over here. It has to be personal. And I would ask all of the journalists to take the personal side of this. Every single one of those people has a family. They have a mother, a father, aunts, uncles, cousins, That's what we have to stop. It's a personal side, and it takes all of us together doing our part to make it safer.
Yeah. Thank you, Wiley. Thank you. Well, thank you, Kirk. Wiley, I'm going to ask you, as the former deputy administrator for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's quite a mouthful,
That it is.
FMCSA, and the expert in the trucking and the freight industry, what are your thoughts on how we can better manage the issue of roadside collisions and disabled motorists? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that Kirk just hit it. It's keeping your eyes on the road, keeping an understanding of what's going on around you. You know, for a truck driver, they have a lot of things going on inside the cab, and so they have to keep monitoring that to make sure the truck is operating safely. But at the same time, they're having to keep their eye out on the windshield for, as they call them, the four-wheelers that are out there driving around them. And wasn't mentioned earlier, but 80% of crashes involving a large truck are caused by external factors like the four-wheelers that are out there that aren't paying attention either, because we didn't have 10 years ago the smartphones that we have now, the info centers that we have in our cars now and in the trucks. And as a truck is on the side of the road, there are federal regulations that say to that driver, if you're disabled on the side of the road, it doesn't matter what conditions are around you, whether it's raining, snowing, pitch black night, cars whipping by you at 70, 80 miles an hour, you have to get out of that truck, move 100 feet behind the truck to put out triangles or flares to notify folks that your truck is disabled. As we saw in the video, that's not safe. That's not safe. Technology is out there today. There are 48 million trucks on the road today. 48 million. And the agencies, the FMCSA and NHTSA, have already started taking action. Currently over at the Office of Management and Budget is a rulemaking requiring AEB on all passenger cars, and we expect that to be forthcoming in the next few months for large trucks. So there's technology out there to address these roadside collisions, and yes, Road to Zero is a key component of, we need to get down to where there are no fatalities. But if we can reduce it by one fatality, you look at what Kirk was saying about 100 people dying a day. That's a plane crash a day, a little bit less than a plane crash, but we don't tolerate that from plane crashes. Why do we tolerate that on our roads?
So Wiley, thank you. Thank you for your focus and your passion. Quick question for you. By the way, AEB stands for what?
Automatic emergency braking.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Government, we love our acronyms.
I just want to make sure everyone understands. Yeah, there's some technology ideas. So is the concern of disabled or stopped in a vulnerable location a concern in the trucking industry?
It is. Again, we're asking, and no, we're demanding that these drivers get out there and put out these warning devices, but yet we're doing nothing to protect them from that vulnerable state of getting out there behind the truck. And what's one things that law enforcement tells you not to do on a highway is go behind your vehicle. Don't do that. But we mandate these drivers to do that every time they're pulled over on the side of the road. So what happens? They get over on the side of the road. A lot of them, and you'll see this, Garrett, just drive down the interstate, you'll see a truck on this emergency lane without the flares or triangles out, because they don't feel comfortable doing that, so they don't do it. So it makes them even more vulnerable for distracted other road users coming along and rear-ending them. And then who's at fault in that regard? The truck driver's at fault because he neglected to put out his warning devices. So there are things that can be done to address these things.
Okay, so there needs to be some dialogue in some of these spaces.
Yes, absolutely.
Just, I think we're shortly out of time here. Quick question. Do state laws about slowing down and moving over, are they a point of discussion out there among regulators and so on? Is that something that the public should support, or
Absolutely.
is there any point of view on that?
Oh, absolutely. Any little bit helps, right? And again, if it saves one life, that's one life that gets to go home to their family. But the challenge is getting that message out there to motorists that this state is a move over state, but you should be doing that anyways. But again, trying to get people to think about these things as they're operating their car, changing the radio station, talking to their friends, whether it's hands-free or they're sitting next to them is always that challenge.
Hey, Andrew, I want to add to that. This comes back to the user's responsibility.
Yes.
The user's responsibility is to drive that car.
Yep.
The user's responsibility to notice somebody's on the side of the road and move over. Give them some courtesy and pretend you were on the side of the road and you would want that car to be 12 feet away from you instead of 2 feet away from you.
Well, and you've got the, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to
Well,
say.
I was going to say, I do think we have a challenge, and that is of all the technology in our cars. So think about adaptive cruise control and blind spot detectors and lane departure assistance and all of these things. And so many consumers get in their car and they turn those systems off because they make a noise or lights flash and they find it annoying. And it's true, it's only about 30% of consumers with this technology actually rely on the technology. So we have a big education challenge here to not only add technology to our cars that help to warn. On your video you showed the Tesla, the Tesla navigation, built-in navigation will notify the driver that there's a vehicle on the side of the road coming up in a quarter mile or whatever. For us to make sure that we're all using the technology that we have. And I think a big part of the problem, and you talk about the user, and I think we're all guilty of this, oh, well, I didn't get to connect my Apple CarPlay yet. I turned off the Bluetooth on my phone.